Let's get underway. Call to order this meeting of the Wheat Ridge Planning Commission. Tonight we're having a special session. My name is Dan Larson. I am the new chairman of the Planning Commission for this term. And I'd like to first thank you all for joining us. Before we begin tonight's meeting, I would like to welcome everyone to our virtual meeting, and I would like to explain this meeting format. Tonight, we have our commissioners and staff visible on a video feed. Members of the public have been invited to comment on Wheat Ridge Speaks in advance of tonight's meeting and are also able to participate live through a web link or by calling in on the phone. If you can find that information, you can find that information on our meeting agenda at wheatridgespeaks.org. All members of the public who are participating live have been muted. When it is time for public comment at the start of our meeting, we will unmute all members of the public. And if there are several people wanting to speak, I will ask you to speak in order based on the first letter of your last name. When we unmute the public, please keep background noise to a minimum. You may choose to mute yourself through your own device. If you do not plan to participate at all this evening, we recommend you simply view the meeting live by watching on Channel 8 or on wheatridgespeaks.org. If you do plan to participate this evening, when you speak, first state your name clearly and spell your last name, and give your street address for the record. The time limit for public comments is 3 minutes per person. Speakers may not donate their time. When there are no more speakers, I will close the time for public comment and public participants will be muted. We appreciate your patience with this virtual format. As with our in-person meetings, we hope that we create a friendly and respectful atmosphere for public dialogue, and we appreciate your help in this process. Thank you. So I'd like to call to order the study session for the Wheat Ridge Planning Commission for May 6, 2021. May I get a roll call of the members, please?
Yes, Tammy is having internet problems, so I'm going to go ahead and do that in her stead. Ari Krichover.
Here.
Jahi Simbai.
Here.
Christine Disney.
Here.
Scott Ohm.
Here.
Will Kearns.
Here.
Daniel Larson.
Here.
Janet Leo.
Here.
And Melissa Antol is absent. Thanks.
And our next, we will say our Pledge of Allegiance. We will now see an image of our flag on the screen. Please join with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I've just enabled that screen share. There we go. Thanks.
There we go. I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
of
States
the United
of America
States of America and to
to
the republic for which it
stands,
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. Now I'd like to approve the order of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the order of the agenda.
Second.
Second.
Okay, the motion has been put forward and seconded. Can we get a vote on the order of the agenda?
Motion carries 7-0.
Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Never mind. Now it is time for our citizen comment on agenda items. Note that unlike regular business meetings, public comment during study sessions is limited to only those items on the agenda. And unlike a public hearing, comment occurs at the start of the meeting and not after the presentation or discussion. Tonight's meeting is a study session. We will now welcome public comment on any of our specific agenda items tonight. Tonight that includes the, excuse me one second. Tonight's study session is a look at the, sorry about that. It's a study session of the Lutheran Legacy Campus Master Plan update. That was very difficult for me to say, thank you. If you plan to speak, please give us your name, spell your last name, and share your address We will not be taking public comment later in the meeting, so that now is the opportunity to speak on any of our agenda items. We will now unmute all speakers. Please keep background noise to a minimum. If you do not plan to speak at this time, you may mute yourself through your own device. Lauren?
We do have 3 members of the public joining us. So if you'd like to raise your hand in Zoom or go ahead and speak up, I've got 2 on Zoom and 1 on the phone who should be able to speak now if they're interested. Nobody with their hand raised at the moment.
Okay, we'll give another minute or so, maybe some technical difficulties with mute and unmute. Let's wait another minute or 2. We want everybody that wants to speak to have a chance to speak. The agenda item again tonight is the Lutheran Legacy Campus, and the study session will look at where we have come so far on that project. I know I'm looking forward to it. Any members of the public that would like to speak, now is the time. Okay, we'll go ahead and in the interest of moving our meeting along, we will close the public comment period at this point. So tonight we have one item for discussion. That's the Lutheran Legacy Campus project that is getting started now. We would, at this point, we'll turn it over to our staff for their report.
Thank you. I'm going to be quick in my introductory comments. I'm happy that Stephanie Stevens, our senior planner, is the city's project manager for this master plan update. And then joining us on the screen now as we speak, we have 2 of our project consultants from MIG. We'll let them introduce themselves in a moment, Jay Rakins and Mark De La Torre. So I'll hand it over to Stephanie to kick us off.
Good evening, planning commissioners. So we've got on board, like Lauren said, myself, Jay, and Mark, and Lauren is also holding tight to this project as well. As a little bit of background, I guess we haven't seen a master plan in a really long time. So this is, I think, new information for a lot of us. And so I'm happy to be the city's project manager for this side of the project. Mark De La Torre is the city's or the MIG consultant project manager for the project, and Jay is with MIG as well. He's the principal. And maybe I'll give them a second to introduce themselves before I jump into the presentation.
Sure, I can start. Jay Rankins with MIG, principal with the firm. I'm our director of Denver area operations and also the director of firm-wide planning and design services.
Yeah, I'm Mark De La Torre. I'm Director of Visualization for MIG and a Senior Project Manager in our Planning and Design Services, functioning as the project manager on this project. Just up the street at 44th and Brentwood, so a near and dear project for me. So very excited to be here with y'all this evening.
Thanks, and we'll kind of share presentation this time around. So I'll start and then I'll be handing it over to Jay and Mark, just as a heads up. Anyone gets confused on what's going on, I'm going to go ahead and share. It's been a while. I don't think we've done a Zoom where I actually got to speak during the presentation, so that's kind of fun. But so MIG, introduce you to them. This is a partnership project between SCL Health Lutheran and City of Wheat Ridge. So we're working all very closely together, and then MIG has some consultants on board, EPS, Fair and Peers, and the ABO group who are working on the technical analysis that will inform the whole process. Let's see if I can get this working for me. Okay, so agenda-wise, this is a good opportunity to give you all some background, since I think you kind of missed out on a little bit of that. Council has a little bit more background since they had to contract the award to MIG earlier this year. So we'll go over that first and then talk about where we're at in the process, public engagement and outreach, kind of the current phase of the technical side of things, existing conditions analysis, and then go over next steps and open it up for discussion. And background wise, I also wanted to just give you a little debrief that, so SCL Health had originally come to us, I think it was back in November or so, and just kind of threw the idea out there of what if this site changes, and it just got us thinking. We don't have any guiding documents that really call for anything but a hospital out here. So that's where this kind of master plan idea came from. And so no proposed changes at the time, and we're glad SCL Health came to us before anything is changing. So thank you to them for that. And we are working closely with them, as I said, so can report back anything that is necessary on that side of things. So project site-wise, we're looking at the Lutheran Medical Campus, owned by SCL Health. It is approximately 100 acres in size, just west of Wadsworth, kind of in the heart of our city. So a very rare opportunity to reassess a site that has been long-standing medical campus hospital uses. It's has 38th Avenue on the north and 32nd Avenue on the south. To the west is bordered by Dudley Street, and on the east is Allison Street. And I guess just as a reminder, like this site, so it's been active as a medical site since 1905. So we're looking at over 100 years. It is, I think we saw the hospital tower, so the 6-story hospital actually go up in 1973, which is when the campus started to really evolve. And with that, we're looking to continue the evolution. I mean, it has changed over time. It's been a very slow process, but hopefully we can keep this going as an evolution rather than a major change or something. We want to really keep the culture that has been a long-term legacy, which goes by the name of the master plan. The site contains more than just a hospital. It has quite a few medical office buildings. It has the memory care center and hospice care, and quite a bit of still, open space areas that a lot of people do enjoy as a community space right now. So we had SCL Health come to us back in about November. They do have a parallel land use application that will be coming to you all on May 20th. So they are considering the possibility of moving the hospital site. We don't know much though in terms of what would stay on the campus and what would go, but that's really not our focus here, is really to focus on, well, what if and what could be. So the Clear Creek Crossing site is the other potential site that's coming before you. So we'll keep that conversation limited just because of the quasi-judicial nature of that application. So it's really focusing on what could be with this master plan. In terms of the history of the site, we went over that, but this is good. This is a good kind of other perspective for you. It really gives you a good view of the hospital itself, which is a pretty tall hospital. And I'll let Mark and Jay go into that because that gets into some of the kind of public engagement exercises that we've been undergoing with the campus tour that went on last weekend. But we have the ditch that runs through it, surrounded by parking. The site itself equates to about 12 city blocks, and the roadway network that is contained in Lutheran is not public roadways. So it's not dedicated right of way, it's all private street network, just things to keep in mind. So what is a master plan and how does this have to do with anything that the city has control over? This is an excerpt from our comprehensive plan, which designates the site as a hospital. So pointing to it, the big blue area in the heart of the city here. It is designated as a hospital. It has some guidance in terms of community and neighborhood anchors, being an employment center, could be public uses. but that's about the extent of it at this point. It's also zoned planned hospital district, so rezoning would be required for basically anything other than a hospital and ancillary uses. So at this point, we're just reevaluating kind of the color on the map, the vision for the site, and not a whole lot more in terms of what exactly the site could be. So how does a master plan fit into the comprehensive plan? It is actually an amendment to the comprehensive plan. So it'll come before you for an adoption recommendation to the city council, which would ultimately be an adopted comprehensive plan document. The comprehensive plan itself is very visionary. So in terms of a master plan, it fits into this sub area plan category, which is a little bit more specific because we get to actually evaluate the site, the 100-acre site itself, and let the analysis inform the decision so it can be rooted in reality. So like the market study, utility study, and traffic study that are underway is a little bit more detailed than what you would get in like a comprehensive plan itself. But then this process just informs those future rezonings. So it's not zoning the site right now. We're not looking at very specific land use approvals. We're really looking at land use and the viability of changing potentially what use is out there now. So again, our approach for this project is really to create that foundation and guiding document that would inform entitlement decisions later on, providing that right level of detail, making it rooted in reality so that we're actually talking about facts of infrastructure, what could be based on what's there, what the site could handle in terms of use. So we're not just making a land use recommendation that's out of the blue that wouldn't ever be able to come to fruition because it can't be served by water or sewer or something like that. Creating the parameters and sideboards to establish the realistic vision. So again, we're not talking about where exactly buildings would have to go, what building materials it is. We're not getting into that level of detail or even the zoning per se. And really part of the goal of this project, the main goal of this project is to plan with and for the community, creating that level of detail, making it rooted in reality and guided by our public decisions. And I'll hand it over to Jay in just a minute here, but just a quick overview. So in the staff report, we talked about a lot of what comprises the public process in this, and it's a very robust public process. Part of the reason we needed Mark and Jay and MIG on board for this whole thing. A lot of it is online because of COVID and everything, but we did have the opportunity to get out on the site and meet with the public face to face, which is really exciting this past weekend on May 1st. Feels like a long time ago already. But we'll have online engagement opportunities up on What's Up Wheat Ridge, and Mark will go over that a little bit more. We have a stakeholder steering committee, which is comprised of members that were nominated or selected by City Council and SCL Health nominations, and we'll have a couple meetings with them. We've already had one. We'll have 4 total public meetings, and that includes the walking tour that took place on May 1st. Throughout the process. And then we're working right now on narrowing down focus group members, which are members from our adjacent neighbors, community-wide, and business groups that will help to inform the process, and also study sessions with you all now and then again in August, where we'll bring kind of more of the data and the drafts of the documents and things like that. And then ultimate adoption, hopefully in October. So it's about an 8-month process. With that, I'll hand it over to Jay.
Great, thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I just wanted to elaborate on really quickly, and then I'll keep my portion on the overall process pretty concise, because Stephanie did a great job, I think, of introducing that. But when we think about sub-area planning or master planning, there's a kind of a wide range potential products, that get called that. So just wanted to reiterate something that Stephanie touched on, which is, we're really approaching this as more of a development framework. So on one kind of extreme end of the spectrum, when you think of a master plan, a developer will often, create a master plan, and they're looking at specific building footprints and the size of the pipes and the exact alignments of the roadways, even the architectural detail. This is probably on the other end of the spectrum when you're talking about master plans, in terms of creating that larger framework to ensure that, if something were to happen, reuse of the site, that it's aligning with the comprehensive plan, with the community's vision, and also the kind of value proposition that would be in play for STL Health. So just a quick note on that. If you want to advance to the next slide. So Stephanie mentioned What's Up Wheat Ridge. We actually have a very active presence already on What's Up Wheat Ridge. So if you have not checked that out yet, please do so. Anyone in attendance, you can see the web address there. And there's opportunities to sign up for information. There's a lot of great background information already being added all the time. And then we're also in the process of creating an online engagement opportunity that aligns pretty well with what we did last Saturday at that self-guided kind of walking open, socially distanced open house. Looking at the schedule, you can see the blue bar, we're just kind of at the front end of that. That actually is signifying next week. But everything under task 2, which is the second dark blue line kind of down the page. So all those purple squares with white diamonds in them represent engagement opportunities. So while we are several months into the process, a lot of that work is focused on existing conditions, which Mark will be touching on. We're kind of rounding that out now, that analysis, and we're just commencing that engagement process. So we have several specific opportunities coming up and many, many more throughout the process. As far as our overall approach, I think Stephanie hit on this very well, so I'll just hit on maybe 1 or 2 points here. We are looking at a multifaceted input process. We need to kind of balance and weigh all those different inputs. We need to think about how this fits not only in the immediate neighborhood, which is very important, those adjacencies and transitions, but also how this fits into the larger city landscape and regionally in some respects too. And so with that, we want to make sure that we're engaging people in a lot of different ways, that we're not only talking at people, of course, but we're providing educational opportunities. We're truly engaging and exchanging ideas, and that we're actually then reflecting back what we're hearing in the work products that we're creating. Next slide. And then I think Stephanie kind of alluded to this too, but this was, I think, a key aspect of our approach, and one that we expect we will, kind of fingers crossed, get to utilize, which was proposing an overall strategy that we kind of talked about threading the needle, so to speak. So depending on how quickly people are vaccinating, herd immunity, comfort levels, local regulations, we're really hopeful we can get back to more of a pre-pandemic normal in terms of engaging folks. But we've also, during the COVID pandemic, become pretty adept at really great interactive online engagement. And so we have a combination of the two delineated in the process, and we know that we're beginning to hear from community members, from different organizations, neighborhoods, a desire to begin to, safety obviously being a paramount importance, but beginning to get in person again. And so we'll be looking for those opportunities to do so in a safe manner. Mark, take it away.
All right, thanks, Jay. Some trouble unmuting there. So as Jay mentioned, many different ways and methods of providing input throughout the process. We wanted to make sure that from the get-go all the way through the end, we had great opportunities and a really diverse range of them to ask questions of the community, to learn from them, to talk about what we're starting to find from an analytical perspective, and then what areas we need to really focus on as we move forward, both in our analysis and in our conversations with y'all and the larger community. So the first big event we had, as y'all may know is this past Saturday from 9 to 12. The MIG consultant team, city staff, SCL representatives were out at the Lutheran campus. We had a 0.85-mile walking tour with 3 main stations focused on the history and context and the built form, transportation and parking, and then really those neighborhood edges, right? The transitions, the open space that, though private property, have been, part of that community open space fabric for a very, very long time. And in those stations, we had numerous boards with a lot of information, a lot of different input strategies. I'm not expecting y'all to read all this, but at each station, big 4-foot by 3-foot boards with a variety of, like I said, activities that the community could provide input and they could learn a little something. As a resident as well, some of it was me just learning a lot about the campus and the hospital, and me wanting to kind of share that with the community at large. And so those conversations, I think, instead of a traditional first public meeting where we might have come in with, hey, here's our existing conditions, here's what we found, what's your vision, what's your goals, we wanted to make sure we started in a little more of a, I'd say, humanized format. So it was a little more fact finding, a little more like, hey, here's what we're starting to learn, what are we missing, what are y'all thinking about some of these kind of higher level pieces. So those different stations, as I mentioned, had a lot of really interesting activities, one being, an example here, a thought exercise. And I frame it as a thought exercise because it was really me, and my neighbors found out very quickly, trying to trick them into doing early morning math. So I built in a lot of cheat codes at the bottom, but it was a bit of a height exercise of, gosh, these buildings are really big. How big are they? And through that, finding out that the new tower, which was built in 2008, is 102 feet tall. And that's a 9-story office building anywhere in town. And I'm not saying that 9-story office buildings are appropriate for the little campus, but it was more like, hey, gosh, that building's been there for quite a while and it's pretty gosh darn big. So we had some of those, we had the whole range, 40 feet tall to 300 feet tall. It was really fun conversations. But like I said, it was me mostly trying to trick my neighbors into doing math pretty early on a Saturday. So other ones were a little more informational. We had flip cards of different types of questions about, how many parking spaces are on campus, or, how many cars are coming out of the hospital every day. And through those, folks got to guess and then flip it up, not dissimilar to what you do at a museum or a zoo, and find out a little bit more about a specific topic. So, one coming up, there's, 2,300 parking spaces on campus. And, there's a utilization rate that leaves about 3.5 football fields of open space of just asphalt every day. And I was like, wow, that's digestible. I get that. That's a lot of parking. Okay, cool. So we had a lot of those great conversations at every station. In addition to, throughout the walking tour, distributing information about did you know. There's the Rocky Mountain ditch is a really important consideration as it goes through campus, right? Ditch easements are an important part of our urban fabric, and thinking about what role that plays from a physical standpoint as well as from a use standpoint was really important. So we made sure that throughout the tour we had little stations about some fun facts about the history of campus, right? As Stephanie noted, the evolution is really important. When we think back to, just on the front end of the hospital development really coming online, these pastoral fields are something that I think we still emotionally attach to the site, but the site itself has evolved to that. We want to think about that evolution and the appropriate evolution as a city and as for SCL's perspective as well. Quick summary just on the event there. As I mentioned, unlike a traditional first public meeting, it was really about just conversations with the community. We had, I think, maybe 60 folks that actually signed a, hey, I'm here. But given the conversations that we had, I'd be happy if we captured half or 2/3 of them. So 2-year-olds all the way to 92-year-olds. It was a great range and cross section, I think, of Wheat Ridge, and it was really exciting to hear the range of really diverse opinions and thoughts about the role of the campus, what it serves today, and what it could serve moving forward. All right, and then kind of to the main piece of it here, and I'll let Jay jump in, the existing conditions portion of it. On the front end of this, as Stephanie noted, it's been a little while since the master plan and sub-area plan have come through. There's definitely been some hurdles as it relates to data access, and we've all been digging deep with service providers and water districts and the whole kit and caboodle, but we're starting to really get close to closing those gaps. So we've extended that front end analysis piece a little bit longer just to make sure that the conclusions we do draw are based on a pretty complete picture. But with that, I'll go and hand it over to Jay on kind of how we're approaching the use of existing conditions.
Great, thanks, Mark. So on the land use side and built form, which we're kind of coupling together in one of the plan elements, we're looking at existing land uses, planned land use in the comprehensive plan, as well as current zoning. as a way to look at what exists on the ground today and what is allowed within current entitlements. We want to make sure that we're couching that within the structure plan of the comprehensive plan. And as we're thinking about the visioning for land use, sort of, I guess, imagine more at the bubble level, if that makes sense, versus individual, parcelization of the site or individual existing buildings, that sort of thing. It's really thinking about the appropriate uses on the site, where those should go generally, and then really importantly, those adjacencies. As we think about, there are largely existing single family neighborhoods adjacent to us on the campus. So we want to think about how do those fit? How do we create public benefit, to the extent possible? And how do we stitch the community, kind of back together in a way? While the campus is obviously an asset, it also disrupts the grid that we see in the neighborhood to the north, the east, and the west. And we have opportunities to create new connectivity, potentially new amenities for the community as we're envisioning the uses on the site. The next is the market analysis. And this is really looking at the, conditions and trends. So what is happening not only in the local market in terms of a variety of different uses. So those would be kind of categorical in terms of residential, retail, office, hospitality. Civic is a use that will be considered, although less of a market-driven use, of course. And then as well as, in the land use side, we think about park and open space. I bring that up because as we're thinking about those public benefits, we think about a development. It is made up of roadways, infrastructure, open space. And so we need to make sure that what is envisioned is actually market supported ultimately. We'd really hate to create a master plan that establishes a development framework that only sets SCL Health up for roadblock after roadblock, and maybe this assuming that they move at some point, if that were to happen, the community would actually be sort of left with a hole that is can't be filled because it's not market supported. So with that also is looking at a site capacity analysis. What is that yield considering those different conditions, and then also those demand estimates. And so I should have mentioned Stephanie at the beginning of the session talked about our partners. So economic and planning systems, that last piece, thinking about market demand and those different drivers, that's economic and planning systems. Fair and Peers is their partner looking at traffic in particular, as well as helping us with the parking aspects. And so when it comes to the traffic, it's really important to think about the our team members have educated me a little bit even more on this than I was previously, but the future background growth. And so there is an element of, Wheat Ridge and the region, traffic is increasing, gradually year over year. And so, yes, we are looking at multimodal improvements to help, curb or mitigate some of that, but there is generally an increase slightly over time. So looking at that and then thinking about what would be the potential increment increase or decrease in both trips and thinking about the times of day of those trips, depending on different uses, as well as the parking demands of those trips, and how can we facilitate people using other modes of travel, transit connectivity, thinking about walking and biking, and how do we connect to both the local and regional networks, and what are some of those strategies we can use to kind of manage that transportation demand overall. And then finally, our last partner, Ron Albo, and his team is helping us with a facility assessment. And so we're in the process of, they're pretty far along actually in their assessment. And it's looking at, to a certain extent, architectural character, but primarily looking at hazards, looking at usability and functionality moving forward, both for existing uses and for potential adaptive reuse. And so a key component of that is, are we meeting current standards, thinking about the value proposition? Are there potential buildings that could be reused? as we're thinking about the overall use. And so the facilities themselves are important considerations, but not necessarily drivers for that long-term vision of the site. We're again kind of thinking about that, or thinking about the campus and how it fits in with the larger structure plan and the comprehensive plan. So an important consideration that we will be able to share more details on the next time we meet with you all. And I think with that, we will invite question and answer and discussion.
Hey Jay, it's Will.
There we go.
Yeah, I was just gonna say pop in or raise your hand. Go ahead. Thanks, Phil.
It's really great that you guys are looking at adaptive reuse, and I mean, at least looking like evaluating the buildings. I'm expecting you to find some asbestos in certain buildings. I think some of them were built around that time period. Also, I don't know if this could be part of it, but I'd like there to be a look at trails. Like maybe make a trails master plan part of this campus master plan, and not only hard surface trails, but also soft surface trails, like some single track that's kind of adjacent, similar to Crown Hill Park. I was kind of thinking like when you're biking or hiking around Crown Hill Park, you have hard concrete trails and you have soft surface trails. And I was wondering if there is space, maybe like a perimeter type trail or something to integrate some trails planning into the master plan.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're definitely thinking about that. And I think especially in light of some of the things we heard on Saturday, people were talking about the fact that they already use the campus and the ditch and the trail that goes along the ditch. But even the internal circulation, they're using on a normal Saturday, not just when we're there set up with booths. And so people brought up the connection to Crown Hill Park. People talked about connections across the southern edge of the campus, which would be much desired. And then obviously retaining the ditch. But you're right, a loop opportunity or multiple loop opportunities would be really fantastic and a really neat way to frame up the development.
Great.
Yeah, I have a question. It's kind of general. How much input is SCL going to have? How much are they going to drive this, or is Weaverage driving it? What's the interaction between the two?
Lauren or Stephanie, do you guys want to tackle that one?
I'll start, and then if anybody else has any other thoughts. So it is a close partnership, most definitely. We're working with them on a daily basis, but there's only so much the city can do as not being the property owner, right? So we have to involve them to the extent that they have the most control of the property itself. So for them coming to us, that's a great thing, and it gives us a great opportunity moving forward. But control-wise, this is really driven by the process, and that's the goal, is that it's not one person making the decision for this entire 100 acres. There's other entities involved too, like the medical office buildings. Some of them actually own or their leased space. They don't plan to go anywhere. So we want this to be comprehensive in that respect. Anyone else want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. So it's truly partnership. They own it, which means they are vested in the outcome of this, but it's the city that adopts this plan, and the plan needs to reflect the community's vision in order to be adopted and set clear expectations for SCL's future buyer and for our community for decades to come. So no single person or entity is sort of driving the outcome in this case.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioners, other questions? Commissioner Holm.
Yeah, so I live about 3 blocks away from this. I go up the SEL through campus probably at least 3, 4, couple times a day, dropping off my kids at the high school, going up Dudley. If I go biking, sometimes I go up to the campus, the parkway. So I'm fairly familiar with it, and the one thing I do see is I always see people, yes, they're on that Highline Trail. I know that sometimes I hear feedback from the Rocky Mountain Ditch Company that they don't want crossings over it, but I know I've biked through that area from Delhi to the parkway, and there are permanent structure little pedestrian bridge crossings over that. I do feel strongly that it would be really great if that trail could be maybe a catalyst for something that is akin to the Highline Canal, where you have this connectivity, and it's kind of really sought after. The Clear Creek is nice. I use that a lot biking, but it would really be nice to have another trail system. And I don't know what the rabbit hole of talking to Rocky Mountain, and I wonder if the city's ever thought about expanding. If this started at the campus, could they have conversations with Rocky Mountain Ditch Company to go east and west to connect?
We haven't, to my knowledge, have those conversations. I think you're right. Rocky Mountain Ditch extends through the vast majority of the city. In a lot of cases, it actually just goes right through people's private backyards. It's easements on single-family homes, unfortunately, which is one of our challenges. But certainly through this segment, I heard the same feedback from a lot of the folks. I was at the open space station on Saturday, and you're not alone in desiring some more formalized trails for either walking or biking through the campus. So we'll look at it. Certainly Rocky Mountain Ditch is one of those agencies that will have to be involved in this process, sort of through all the phases. So we're working on communicating with them too. They're a little possessive of the ditch, but trying to flex.
And then along Dudley, I see people right now, there's like a little, I don't know, foot trail, cattle trail that they walk on the SEL health side all the time with their dogs or whatever. And one of the reasons is there's a berm right there, probably for noise mitigation, I would assume, from the helicopter pad. And I don't know at some point if I can't imagine that the west side would ever have a sidewalk and curb, of Dudley, the west side. But I don't know if there's any considerations if things got built out, if there would be some type of street escape, with a detached sidewalk on the east side of Dudley. That's a question. I don't know that I need an answer to that, but I just kind of noticed that. And then just trying to cross safely as a pedestrian from the campus parkway going to Crown Hill can be a little tough. You really got to watch. There's a lot of traffic. I would assume that any expansion, especially if there's any residential component, that would add volume. And I don't know if the city at that point, if there's gonna be some triggers you'd have to widen 32nd. 32nd's a really narrow street. And I see that the majority of the volume right now can come through the parkway and through that other, it has another parkway name on the west side, but Delhi is just a 2-lane street. And the majority of the street on 38th kind of stops at that second. It's kind of the emergency entrance. That's where that stops, and then it just becomes kind of a 3-lane for traffic. And so those are kind of the main routes. And 32nd gets pretty busy, a lot of traffic. So I see transportation as a huge issue. And then with the building height, if it were theoretically rezoned, since Wheat Ridge has the 35-foot, residential, I would assume that those two existing buildings, they're really nice buildings, that probably the only thing they could become would be like retail and office. They could never become residential. Is that correct? Unless it went through the city charter voting process.
Yeah, so if they actually reused or repurposed the existing buildings, they could keep the height that's there, I think, with no matter the use. If those buildings come down that are 91 feet and 102 feet tall, they can't go back up to that. So that could come as a action item out of the master plan too, is to readdress the height. But right now, yeah, that's what the case would be.
So could they be but they would exceed the 35-foot height limitation.
Yeah, it's a good observation. We,
Yeah.
like, as soon as we started this process, we went to City Attorney Jerry Dahl and said, like, what are our limiting factors here? And the charter language is actually very specific that it applies to new buildings. So repurposed buildings are not constrained by that language in the charter.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I could definitely see those becoming, little condos or apartments, and they'd be snapped up very quickly in those buildings. I have no other questions. Thank you. Or comments.
Other questions?
To mention, so Scott had mentioned traffic, and I'm a traffic guy, and I noticed that in the maps, a lot of the arrows were just utilizing the same North Lutheran Parkway, and I think that's fine. However, I think we should also look at the option to connect to the rest of the grid. And I'm talking about an additional connection or two to Dudley Street, possibly pushing Cody Street from a dead end to a grid connection, Balsam Street, Ammons Court, potentially, I don't know, anywhere we could connect to the grid to actually look at that to help distribute traffic instead of concentrating it all at North Lutheran Parkway. Sort of reconnecting the campus to the grid, I think could help better distribute traffic, and maybe we don't have to signalize as much, or potentially maybe we don't have to widen 32nd. I hope we wouldn't have to do that regardless, but at least maybe take a look at that.
Yeah, the arrows on the map, just for clarification, that we don't have a plan yet, so they're really just delineating the existing circulation pattern. And that the connectivity of the grid is, I think that's one where we definitely want to create informed input. Because I think that's a counterintuitive thing for a lot of people, they think, oh, well, if you make a connection, then all of a sudden we're gonna have let's cut through traffic, which that can happen, but also if you approach it correctly, to your point, you can distribute traffic, and there's actually less intensity or and potential congestion on a particular connection. So that's one where we want to educate and inform and then listen.
I'm assuming you would get some pushback from the neighbors that are currently on those dead end streets that maybe wouldn't like that, but I think in the overall scheme of things, it could be better for everybody and possibly allow us to avoid a signalized intersection at Lutheran Parkway and 32nd Ave, or other sort of upgrades of the traffic infrastructure. I don't know. I think it's something to talk about.
I'm about to, I got ants in my pants over here. I live on Balsam Street right now. And there is at 38th at that light, they've angled the parkway so you can't drive onto Balsam if you're turning left. And let me tell you, people do it all day long. And it is incredibly annoying to have people zooming past the speed limit up and down my street. And I can tell you for certain, you will get pushback from those neighborhoods, from traffic going through there. And that is a great fear of a lot of the people in my neighborhood, of what's going to happen to the quality of life when this gets developed if we allow connectivity to 44th. I think it's patently unfair for us to be expected to take on all of this additional traffic. And I think Mark lives on Brentwood, I believe, Mark Delatorre.
Yeah.
I don't think he wants to have a lot more. I think the people that live on Dover experience tremendous cut through traffic. They've got 4 or 5 speed bumps right now to mitigate the speed. Doesn't help. So my concern and my vocalization on this project is going to be about traffic and how to handle the traffic through the residential areas.
Thanks, Christine.
Thank you, Commissioner Disney. Any other questions?
I had a quick question. I'm wondering if what consideration there's been for sort of repurposing, not the buildings as much as sort of the existing sort of concrete footprint that's there now, to develop sort of multi-use. I guess the thing I'm thinking about is I've noticed a lot of food trucks popping up around Wheat Ridge in sort of random locations. You know, there's like a funnel cake school bus in front of Pep Boys on Wadsworth, and there's, I don't even know what they're selling out of the food truck in front of the old Quality Auto Care on 38th. But some kind of multi-use space that could function as a food truck courtyard on certain days, or you know, other things other than just a large parking area, which may also help reduce vehicle traffic if we're not sort of encouraging vehicles to, you know, come into that area.
Yeah, there are a lot of really great ideas that, and just in initial conversations, again, knowing that we're on the front end of a lot of that, just about, hey, Carnation Festival wasn't always at Anderson. Maybe it's the evolution of the Carnation Festival, and we designate a big new design space that's really about celebrating. And that, this, you know, just, I'm now parroting what I've been hearing from neighbors, but I mean, there are a lot of things around that. And so whether or not, you know, when it's not the festival, it's a food truck or farmers market on the weekends or what have you, those are the things that actually we're starting to already kind of trickle in from the community in our first kind of round of conversations.
Cool.
Yeah, the other thing I might add in that regard is working with the site. I mean, I think is the bigger idea, Ari, that you're mentioning. And so whether that's, you know, the ability to not pave or, you know, create pervious surfaces where there's impervious now, using the topography of the area, retaining as much of the tree canopy as possible, you know, that really beautiful sort of natural area along the ditch through the core of the campus. Some people, it was funny, we heard people who loved it and use it almost daily, and then people who were like, I had no idea that was even there when they came to the campus. So that's definitely something that we want to, you know, we want to integrate into this process and identify those opportunities in this development framework that we're creating.
Cool, thank you.
And just to add briefly, that to hopefully out of, you know, having some supporting analysis on this project as well, it can inform, you know, what's the capacity of the roadway network that it can handle to be able to support what types of uses, so that we know what could go in. And then I thought it was really interesting, MIG had put together an exercise, which is probably what you saw on the screen, for the different types of, and it was really addressing form rather than like roadway network, but it was like, do you want it to stay all the way what it is now to the opposite end of the spectrum to the urban grid? And we got a lot of answers in between, very little to the urban grid, a lot of people who want to keep it the same. That's kind of where that ended up landing, but it was an interesting conversation to be had for sure.
Thank you, Stephanie. Jahai, Commissioner Simbai.
Yes, thank you. First, I want to say it was great to be out and see the site live. Thank you for doing that. Except for the wind that kept knocking over all the signs, it was a pretty cool way to get around and see it with the family. I want to talk more about like process. So a lot seems to be based on the schedule happening this month. And I'm wondering, you know, what do you all see as the potential challenges if, you know, that would set this schedule back, that we couldn't make it, you know, the final master plan by October? Just, you know, more about the process. What do you see as some of the challenges ahead?
Well, I think luckily we jam-packed it in the front end for the purpose of getting the public involvement right away, right? Because we don't want people to feel left out, and we want to hear their word before the master plan document becomes a document, right? So there's a lot of give room kind of between, like the summer long, we only have kind of one meeting per month after this month. So it starts to slow down. I don't think we're going to run into a big issue on timing of process, but I don't know if others have opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the process that we did set out at the start of the project. So there's already a little ebb and flow in there in terms of making sure that I mentioned on the existing conditions, we want to make sure we have the full picture before we start taking our like, oh, here are our findings. So some of that starting to shift as it relates to engagement, though. I think it's the relationship to different points with other points in the process and making sure that there's a certain sequencing of that information as it relates to our conversations with y'all, with focus groups, with different types of events. I don't see an issue at the overall completion. That being said, there might be something that we uncover at the end of the analysis or at our second public meeting that derails everything. So my optimism
Right.
hopes that doesn't occur, but right, other than some outstanding piece that no one's anticipating right now, that's I think we should be on track for that. Plus, I've given out my personal address to far too many people at the kickoff event, so I'd like to stick to that.
And phone number and email.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, Councilman, the other thing. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say one
Okay,
other
I
thing.
just wanted to say that the analysis piece of the puzzle, sorry, Jay, the analysis piece of the puzzle is probably our biggest unknown in terms of what the outcomes are going to be.
Yeah, I was just going to add, in my experience on this type of project, if we do, we have to add a month or something, and it slides into November, December, it's typically actually allowing the appropriate time for the community dialogue to happen. So yes, maybe there's data lag or something in coordination with, on the ditch or, something to that effect, but more cases than not, it's actually, some, I don't want to say conflict necessarily, but, potential disagreement, or we're still, weighing two different alternatives. And we want to we don't want to rush the process just to hit that October deadline. So I think that would be the scenario, most likely scenario, if we did slide the schedule, would just be allowing a little more breathing room to have the sufficient, community process and dialogue.
Thank you. That's great. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Other commissioners, are there other questions that we have at this point?
One more comment. I have a comment and a question. My comment is, one of the best parts about this campus are the trees. And can we try to preserve trees at all possible, especially some of the older, larger trees? Sort of make that a priority. And I think, I don't know if you'd be able to touch the ones around the ditch, but there's some other ones along North Lutheran Parkway that are really great. So if we can try to make tree preservation a priority, would be great. And then my question is, it sounds like we're looking at putting in some significant residential component in there with all these additional rooftops. Would this support any sort of retail as well? Are we looking at potential retail spaces as part of this?
Yeah, I can lead us off, but yeah, what we communicated, what we've been talking about as an internal team, including with SCL Health, and what we communicated on Saturday to folks is that we're assessing all potential land uses. EPS's analysis, for instance, will be looking at a full range of uses. I think retail, one of the things that we would need to consider is not just the rooftops, because we know retail is successful nearby, but the visibility, particularly in this location. And it is, if you look at the structure plan and you look at, the plan and, design work for 38th, for instance, it kind of stops. I mean, I guess it crosses over WADs a little bit, but, it generally stops. So I think we would have to think about, strategically, if that does ultimately kind of rise to the top as a viable use and a desired use by the community, how do you connect, with the kind of the breadcrumb trail, sort of connecting the, sort of linking to the existing network. So I think it's possible.
It's kind of hidden back there.
Yeah, but we need to be really strategic about it and, kind of set it up for success. If that does rise to the top as a, again, feasible and desired land use.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Other comments or questions? Commissioner Simbai.
One more comment. So, what happened to St. Anthony's over in Denver, I guess on the west side, I can imagine a lot of people are saying, hey, I want something similar, or I don't want anything like that. It seemed like for me personally, kind of a cool little area over there. knowing that the hospital was there for so long, and I actually had gone to that hospital. My mother worked over there for a little while. So, I mean, is that pushing, you hear a lot of comments on people saying, I want something similar, because that had retail and residential mix, which seems to be working okay, at least pre-pandemic. So I just love your comments on that.
Yeah, so me personally on Saturday, and I'd invite Stephanie and Mark and Lauren to chime in too, but you're exactly right. I heard people say, oh my gosh, it'd be so cool to have a St. Anthony's here, or Sloan's Lake. And then we also heard people say we don't want anything even closely approximating what happened over there. And a lot of people in between the two. I think that is an interesting development, sort of on the heels of Will's or council or Commissioner Kearns there. But because it is a destination retail sort of approach, right? Like it has some visibility on Colfax, but like the real heart of it is actually off of the beaten path. And so you can achieve, placemaking, whether it's a retail component or some other, really nice destination, and sort of, I think, right size the draw to local, community regional, depending on what the intent is, if you do it the right way. So it's a good example of a kind of a destination retail that is, very successful, even with COVID over the last year, in that new development.
Thank you, Jay. Commissioner Disney?
So in considering all of the possible uses, including potential retail, I am going to assume, but I'm not sure, that you would be considering the impact that additional retail would have on Clear Creek Crossing and plans for 38th Avenue, Wadsworth area. I would think that additional retail in this location would severely impact those areas. Am I right or wrong?
So the analysis that EPS typically does for us on this type of project looks at potential absorption. So that is in the context of existing retail. So they'll look at, is there additional increment within sort of that retail sector, but then I think importantly, they slice that more finely. And what we want to do, I think, to your point, is not cannibalize from those other places. And if there were a retail component, which again, that's not a foregone conclusion by any means, but we want to make sure that's something that complements, nearby retail and retail kind of across the community, so that we're really kind of setting everyone up for success.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from our commission? If there are no other comments, I would like personally I agree with Commissioner Simbai on the need to make sure that there is sufficient consideration for possible commercial uses. Looking at the staff memo that we got with this meeting tonight, it notes that the Lutheran campus is the largest employer in the city of Wheat Ridge, with 2,000 associates, 900 physicians, and 600 volunteers. In the next paragraph, it says the plan also designates the site for primary employment. And we haven't heard from the hospital yet on when they relocate, how many of those employees will be moving out to the new campus. But I think it's probably safe to say it will be a net loss. So I'd like to think that part of the consideration as we go forward is that the opportunity to include some sort of commercial development, whether it's retail or something else, that helps support employment here in Wheat Ridge and provides jobs, along with other things. This is a sort of a one-time opportunity. Well, it is a big opportunity for the city to sort of bring these different desires and needs and things that people are looking for together into a single campus. There are existing buildings, but I can imagine some of them won't kind of pass muster. And I also agree with Commissioner Simbai on the sort of example set by the St. Anthony redevelopment there. That is a bit different because you are in you're in the city there, and the neighborhood is a little more tightly, a little more dense than we have out there. But overall, they had a plan there that took them from a fairly intense single use to multiple use. There are residences, there are office buildings, there are retail, and many uses of that fairly compact space. If I'm not mistaken, it is quite a bit smaller than what the Lutheran campus would involve. So one of the things that we'll be looking for is this sort of way that you know, given what you're hearing from the public and what you're hearing from local businesses and your market analysis, what are some of the ways that this wonderful campus space can be used to take care of the people, the things that people are looking to do for recreation, but also providing some jobs and some other opportunities for the city. Okay, any other questions or comments? I think it's been a very good session so far.
Thanks, Commissioner Larson. I think that was a great comment, and we'll definitely add that in to the mix. Well, thanks. Keep an eye out too on What's Up Wheat Ridge. We'll have an online tour trying to replicate kind of what happened on May 1st, popping up online in the next couple weeks here. So, and it'll be a participatory activity where you can actually engage with the process. So that would be fun if you all jumped on and did that activity too. Thanks.
And if that is it, we will close our study session discussion of the Lutheran Hospital Legacy Campus project. We will now move on to new business. Is there any new business to discuss tonight other than what we've already talked about?
No other new business.
Okay.
Thanks, and Mark and Jay for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's go to
thank you.
Let's go to old business. Any old business we need to discuss this evening?
Just two of my normal spiels. In terms of upcoming dates, we will have a meeting on Thursday, May 20th. That will be the review of the site plan for the hospital campus at Clear Creek Crossing. And then I am upping my game a little bit on the project and development updates. I'm gonna share my screen real quick to give you an update on the TOD area. Let's see if this works. So I realized that you guys have not seen anything related to the TOD area in quite some time, but Planning Commission did have a pretty big role in approving some of the subdivision plats and site plans out here. Let me catch my notes here real quick. Are you able to see a map with some yellow shaded areas? Perfect. Okay. I know I'm setting the bar high here maybe with this update, but a visual might help a little bit. So first of all, this is an aerial of our farthest northwest area of town. So you can see this black line is the city boundary where it gets a little funky, where it intersects with Arvada and Jeffco. The station for the train is down here where this icon is. And you'll recall from some of the other guiding documents that we've done in this area that we really value. We were talking about jobs. We really value this as a job center. It's most of our industrial zoning is sort of south of the tracks. And so to that end, the first project I wanted to give you an update on, you may recall Sns Plumbing. It was a family-owned plumbing business, and Planning Commission reviewed the site plan for that just over a year ago. It was February of 2020. They came to you and shared their story about how the business had grown, but then they were so busy they didn't have time to build sort of this bigger building, which was good because they ended up building it even larger than they would have if they'd done it 5-10 years earlier. That building is now done. It's super, as somebody in our office would say, it's a very handsome building. If you haven't seen it, really, it raises the bar, I would say, for sure, on sort of what we expect urban industrial to look like. So that's number one on the square. It's right there on 52nd. And then we have done some zone changes and some projects to support transit densities. So we do have some residential projects on the north side of the tracks. We've really been protecting the land on the south side of the tracks to retain jobs and along 51st here, or Ridge, sorry, Ridge Road. But the four residential projects I wanted to point out, Toll Brothers came to you a couple years ago with the subdivision plat. That's number 2. They dedicated a huge amount of roads to connect the grid in there. That was 200 townhomes. And they had, you may recall, they had divided that property into 4 phases. So phase 1 was down here at the hard corner. And then I think it goes phase 2, phase 3, and then phase 4. If you've been in that area in a while, we have already issued a quarter of the building permits, and they have folks living in some of these buildings down here in phase 1. The model is open if you ever want to go through there. They're more of sort of a farmhouse style. Market absorption, the rate of sales has been much faster than we expected and did not see a slowdown at all through COVID. So again, we've got 25% of the permits already out the door. We have more already in with us for review, and they are working on the infrastructure for phases 3 and 4. So they're quick pace out there. Number 3 is the Hance Station Townhomes. It's named after the family that used to have that alpaca ranch, the Hance Ranch. And this is a Remington project. Some of you would have seen maybe even the zone changes for these projects years ago, maybe 7-8 years ago. And then there was a subdivision plat that created these 2 areas, 3 and 4, and the road in between. And then another subdivision plat a few years ago that created the townhomes and the alley network in number 3. That is 63 townhomes, and they also have some of their buildings completed, particularly the 2-story ones. You'll remember maybe that they're shorter when they face the neighborhood and taller as they get into the site. And they've sold a lot faster, I think, than anyone expected as well. And they've got a model open if you ever want to see that. And then number 4, closest to the station, you did not see the site plan. Planning Commission did not see the site plan, but again, you did see the plat that created that area a while ago. That is going to be an apartment complex. It's by the Forum Group. And if you've been by the site lately, the construction you've seen out there is the start of the parking garage. So like some of our newer multifamily products, the parking garage will be completely hidden by the apartments wrapping it on 4 sides. And then the last one I wanted to highlight, so this is a 2020 aerial. This is Arvada, so that's a project in Arvada. And then we skip back into Wheat Ridge where number 5 is. That used to be called Quail Run. It's now called Station 54. It's by Wonderland Homes, another builder. Planning Commission saw, I think, the zoning and the specific development plan and the plat all in the last 5 years. It had been, I think, 2 really large properties, was rezoned to a planned residential development. You can see a little bit of the road network in here. I'll zoom in a little bit. There are 14 detached single family homes to sort of mimic the pattern you see in the surrounding neighborhood. And then this interior square is townhomes. I understand that all 14 of the detached homes are sold already. And we have issued, I think, like a third of the permits already, with more under review. So those are really busy. If you drive through that area, it's a lot of construction, we know, and great because we're really trying to support the regional investment in this transit line, which brings me just to the tiny bit of RTD news that I have is that RTD, if you don't get their sort of newsletters, you've probably seen in the news that they have a new executive director, but they're also undergoing 2 studies right now. So they're doing a fare study, FARE, like how much fare you pay to take a trip. So an equity study on their fares. And then they're also doing a long range plan. What do they call it? Reimagine RTD. They were always planning to do sort of a long range plan to figure out sort of what's next after fast tracks. And that scope, I believe, has shifted a little bit since COVID had such a big impact on their ridership. So if you're interested in following what they're doing, I would encourage you for sure to go to the RTD site. But that was my longer update for today.
Lauren, going back to that Station 54, I know when we had discussed that there was some questions about the access road coming off of Ridge going north and how it really wasn't a very good road. And has that been addressed yet? Because I know that there's that road got split in half with the Arvada development. Yep,
that's a good memory. So Quail Street, which connects Ridge to 54th, it straddles. It starts mostly in Wheat Ridge and it ends mostly in Arvada, and that has been worked out. So that they had to complete the segment of roadway sufficient to be able to even obtain any building permits. And this aerial is now, that I had up, is now at least a year old. It doesn't look like that anymore. If you go out there, there's roads now that you can drive on. Yep.
Well, very
It
good.
took a little while
Yeah.
longer than they'd hoped, but it did get worked out. Yeah.
Yeah, I could imagine it took a little while to get that ironed out, but I'm glad to hear that that you can call that one mission accomplished, right?
Yes. Yeah. Mission accomplished. Yeah. So that's all I had, unless there's questions about that batch of projects.
Are there any other questions from the commission? We will entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion, we adjourn.
Second,
Second.
call for a vote. Thank you, everybody. Good
Thank
meeting tonight.
you.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good.